Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime stories. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. And if there's a story you'd like to hear next, I'd love to know that too. Some cases stay with you long after the charts are closed, after the staff meetings, even after you leave the profession entirely. I've worked in psychiatric care for over 25 years. State hospitals, locked wards, acute stabilization units. I've seen schizophrenia, catatonia, dissociative identity disorder, even rare neurological overlap syndromes. But every now and then something cuts through all the clinical understanding and leaves you with questions medicine can't answer. We had a patient, let's call him Mr. Bell. He was admitted to our long-term ward in his early 60s. History of severe trauma. Institutionalized off and on since his 20s. Conservatorship. No known relatives. No visitors. For the first year he was with us, he never spoke a word. Nonverbal, alert, compliant, but silent. He could nod or shake. His head feed himself when prompted, but never uttered a single sound. His file said he'd been selectively mute for decades. We placed him in room 212, down at the end of West Hall, a quieter, older wing of the hospital. That section dated back to the 1950s. You could still see the outlines of old paint under the new coats and the faint yellowing of aged linoleum floors. The room had a single small window high on the wall and a ceiling of square acoustic tiles, the kind you find in every aging medical building. I only mention that because it mattered later. At first, nothing stood out. Mr. Bell followed routine, ate when guided, bathed when prompted. Blank stare, no distress, no emotion. He was quiet to the point of invisibility. That changed on a Thursday morning. I was doing rounds, walking past his door when I heard a voice. At first I thought it was one of the staff aides talking to him. But when I opened the door, it was just Mr. Bell, alone. He was sitting upright in his chair, hands folded neatly in his lap, and speaking. Not muttering, not mumbling, speaking. Full, coherent sentences. Conversational tone calm and steady, but he wasn't talking to me. He was looking up, his gaze fixed on a single ceiling tile in the corner above his bed, and speaking to it. I tried to engage him, asked if he needed anything, if he was all right. He didn't react. Didn't even blink in my direction. I asked again, and he simply lifted one hand, his index finger pressed to his lips, signaling silence. His eyes never left that ceiling tile. Over the next few weeks, this became routine. Every morning, same time. He'd sit in that chair and speak upward, calm, focused, like he was answering questions, pausing between sentences as if listening to a reply. If anyone interrupted or spoke too loudly, he would stop immediately, go silent for hours, and refuse all interaction. We documented it, of course. Psychiatry evaluated him. No medication changes, no new symptoms of psychosis or seizure activity. Labs clean. The working theory became post-traumatic recall behavior. Some kind of dissociative episode, perhaps, though no one could explain why it happened only at that time or always to that same tile. Then maintenance came. There'd been a small leak in the air duct that ran above West Hall. 2 men were sent in to check each ceiling tile. When they reached room 212, Mr. Bell was out at an activities session, so they began work. I was there when it happened. The tile, the one he always stared at, was old but intact. When they removed it, something thin and warped fell from the back of it. It was a Polaroid photograph taped to the top side of the tile, facing the crawl space. The photo was faded, edges curled from time and heat. It showed a young man, early 20s, wearing hospital-issued clothing. He was seated on a narrow bed, expression blank. Along the bottom, a timestamp, July 14th, 1974. And just behind him in the background, the faint outline of a restraint chair. One of the older nurses gasped. She recognized him. So did I. The man in Diastatioi, that photograph was a former patient, one who had died in that very room, room 212, nearly 40 years earlier. He'd taken his life after a violent restraint incident. hanged himself with a bedsheet during a staff rotation. It was a tragedy that had forced a policy review back in the day, something the old staff still whispered about but never discussed openly. No one knew how the photograph got there. Maintenance swore they'd never seen it. Records showed the ceiling tiles had last been replaced during an HVAC upgrade in the early 2000s. But there was no mention of any photo, no one who admitted to putting it there. After that day, Mr. Bell never spoke. Again, not to the ceiling, not to us. It was as if, once the photo was discovered, the conversation, whatever it was, had ended permanently. 3 months later, he passed away quietly in his sleep. No signs of distress, no cause beyond natural failure. When we cleared the room, maintenance took the old tiles for disposal, including the Polaroid. But before they did, a few of us made copies, not out of disrespect, but because we knew we'd never be able to explain it otherwise. Even now, years later, I still have mine. Sometimes I catch myself looking at that faint, ghostly face in the photo, wondering what he'd been trying to tell Mr. Bell, and wondering what Mr. Bell had been saying back. You spend enough time in psychiatry, and you learn that silence is never just silence. It carries weight. Sometimes it carries voices, and sometimes it carries the memory of someone who never left the room. I used to think night shifts in psychiatric hospitals were peaceful. Dim hallways, machines humming softly, the occasional code call, but mostly a kind of eerie calm. That was before I worked at St. Augustine State Hospital, before I heard the screaming that never stopped. It began in the North Annex, a wing built in the 1960s and mostly used for long-term psychosis patients. It had narrow halls, a constant flicker from old fluorescent bulbs, and that faint metallic smell of disinfectant that clings to your clothes long after you leave. I was the night charge nurse, meaning it was my job to do rounds, check the logs, and make sure no one was off their meds or having an episode. It was routine work, until room 119. That room had been empty for years. It wasn't condemned, not technically, but there were stories. Staff said a patient named Eleanor Phelps had died there in 1987. Suicide, they said, but no one could find her full records. Whenever someone was assigned that room, strange things happened. Patients complained of hearing a woman screaming in their dreams. Others claimed the lights flickered only in that room, even when the wiring was replaced. We eventually just stopped admitting anyone there. The door stayed locked, the chart was blank, and we moved on. But then we got a new patient. Daniel Harker, age 34, chronic paranoid schizophrenia with auditory hallucinations. He'd been found wandering an overpass, claiming a woman was trapped in the walls. He was placed in 119 because every other room was full. I protested, told administration that it was against ward policy, but they said it was temporary. He'll be moved in the morning. That night, everything changed. At 1:42 a.m., the ward alarms tripped. Not a code, not a fire, just the emergency alert from room 119. When I got there, Daniel was standing in the middle of the room, eyes wide, trembling so hard his hospital gown stuck to his chest with sweat. He kept pointing to the wall. "The woman," he said, "she's in there. She keeps screaming." I checked the wall. Nothing. The light fixture flickered once, and I remember thinking, here we go again. Same electrical nonsense. We sedated him lightly, wrote it up, and went back to the desk. But then around 3:17 a.m., it happened again. This time the sound came through the hallway speakers. A long, shrill, blood-curdling scream, high-pitched, raw, and distinctly human. It echoed through the intercom system like feedback, but distorted, like someone was trapped inside a metal box and shrieking to be let out. Every patient on the ward woke up, pounding on doors, crying, screaming back. It took nearly 30 minutes to restore order. Security did a sweep. No one found anything. No recordings, no glitches, no evidence. The IT team swore the intercom wasn't even active after 10 p.m. That system had been shut off years ago. Daniel Harker refused to sleep the rest of the night. He sat upright, mumbling to himself. "She knows you heard her now. She won't stop until you answer." The next night I volunteered to stay again, partly because I wanted to prove it was some prank, partly because I couldn't let the idea of that scream eat at me. I did my rounds, checked vitals, logs, meds, everything fine, until 2:03 a.m. That's when I heard it again. Faint this time, like it was coming from inside the walls. A woman's voice, sobbing, breath hitching between screams. "Help me. Please, get me out." I froze. You know that feeling when every hair on your body stands on end but you can't move? That's exactly what it felt like. It wasn't an echo or a delusion. The sound was real, vibrating faintly through the metal bed frame. Then Daniel began laughing, not hysterically, just softly, like he knew something I didn't. "She's found you now," he said. "She only needs one listener." We called maintenance the next morning. They tore into the drywall, expecting to find rats, wires, something that might explain the noise. Instead, they found another wall behind it, sealed with brick and plaster. No air vents, no insulation, nothing. When they broke through, the smell hit first: rot, old moisture, and something like burnt hair. Inside that sealed space was a small cavity, barely big enough for a person to crouch in. And in that space, they found what was left of a body. A woman's skeleton, still wearing fragments of a hospital gown, and around her wrist, rusted, metal cuffs chained to the inner studs of the wall. The name tag, though barely legible, said E. Phelps. The coroner estimated she'd been dead for decades, likely since the late 80s. Cause of death: asphyxiation and dehydration. The hospital covered it up, of course. Officially, it was a discovery of historic remains during structural maintenance. The North Annex was shut down for renovations, and Daniel was transferred to another facility. But before he left, he asked me for a piece of paper. He drew something, an old floor plan of the ward, and marked a small X over room 119. Underneath, he wrote 3 words: "She's not alone." A year later, after I'd left St. Augustine, I got a call from one of my old co-workers. They'd started reopening the South Annex, the opposite end of the building. Fresh paint, new lights, new patients. But during one of the wiring tests, the electrician reported something strange. When they turned on the new intercom system, they heard static. Then, faintly, a woman's voice. Crying. "The room number?" 19. Hospitals are full of screams. You get used to them after a while. Pain, confusion, withdrawal. But some screams don't come from the living, and once you've heard them, they never really stop. Hospitals have a way of keeping secrets. You can paint the walls, change the staff, replace the equipment, but the building remembers. It soaks up everything: the cries, the panic, the silence after someone's last breath. And some places, they never let go of what they've seen. I learned that in 2009, when I worked the night shift at Ravensgate Psychiatric Hospital, in the East Wing we called the Window Ward. The name was ironic. The windows there were sealed shut decades ago, bolted from the outside, painted over, glass fogged with years of grime. Patients joked that if you stood near them too long, you could hear tapping from the other side. We used to laugh until it started happening for real. When I transferred, there it was supposed to be temporary, 3 months to cover staff shortages. I'd heard the stories. The wing was active, restless, bad energy. Most of the nurses rotated out after a few weeks, not because of violence or stress, but because of the feeling. It wasn't something you could explain in a report. You'd just be sitting at the desk, charting vitals, when suddenly you'd realize that the hall had gone completely silent. Not normal silence, this thick, heavy quiet that felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Then came the knocks, always 3 of them, soft, deliberate, from the windows. At first it was easy to brush off. The building was old. Pipes groaned, temperature shifted, glass expanded. But the knocks always came at the same time, 2:19 a.m. to the second, every night. It didn't matter where you were. Room 203, 205, 207, all at once, 3 slow taps against the window pane. We even timed it once. The sound moved down the hallway, one window after another, like someone walking slowly past outside. But that couldn't be. The exterior of that wing faced a courtyard completely surrounded by concrete walls. No access, no doors, no lights. No way anyone could walk out there. The first time I saw it, I was doing rounds. Room 206. The patient was a woman named Marjorie. Lane. Severe major depression, post-ECT, mostly catatonic. She hadn't spoken in months, just sat in her chair near the window staring at nothing. That night, I walked in to check her pulse ox. The room was dim, only the hallway light spilling in. And then I saw it. A handprint smeared across the inside of the glass. 5 long fingers, pressed so hard they'd left faint streaks of condensation. But here's the thing. Marjorie was sitting on the bed 10 feet away and she hadn't moved all day. I wiped the print with a towel. When I looked back 30 seconds later, it was there again. Only this time, the handprint was on the outside of the glass. Over the next few weeks, things escalated. Patients began waking at 2:19 every night screaming that someone was looking in through their windows. Security checked the courtyard multiple times. No footprints, no signs of intrusion. One night, a guard brought his K9 unit to patrol the perimeter. The dog wouldn't go near the east wall. It just stood there, whimpering, hackles raised, staring straight at the windows. Then Marjorie spoke. It happened during morning meds. She looked straight at me for the first time and whispered, "He's waiting for you now." I froze. "Who's waiting?" She didn't answer, just turned her head toward the window. The glass was fogged again, and words had appeared in the condensation, like someone had written from the outside. 3 words, "Open the window." We filed incident reports. Maintenance checked every seal and bolt, everything intact. But that night, during rounds, room 206 was empty. Marjorie was gone. No broken locks, no signs of struggle, just her hospital gown folded neatly on the chair, by the window. And the window itself, still sealed, bolts untouched. Security swept the building, every floor, every exit. No trace. It wasn't until 5 a.m. that someone thought to check the courtyard. They found her there, lying in the center of the concrete square, 3 stories below her room. No broken glass above her, no entry points, no damage to the window. Just there, eyes open. Face turned upward like she'd fallen through the air, except there was no way she could have. After that, the window ward was officially closed for structural review. Patients were relocated, staff reassigned, but no one wanted to talk about it. The official story said Marjorie suffered a fatal fall under unclear circumstances, but we all knew the truth. We just couldn't say it out loud. I transferred out a week later, couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me, that every time I passed a window at night, I'd see something move just out of the corner of my eye. Not a reflection, not a shadow, something watching. I even covered the mirrors in my apartment for a while. But one night, as I got home from work, I saw it again. In my living room window, 3 faint handprints side by side. And underneath, traced in the condensation, were those same 3 words. Open the window. Sometimes late at night I hear it again. 3 slow knocks against the glass. Always at 2:19. And I've learned something important. Hospitals don't keep the dead inside. They just give them a way to look back in. I've worked in psychiatric care for most of my life. 28 years if you count my time as an orderly before I got my license. I've seen the human mind break in every way imaginable. Delusions, obsessions, psychotic fractures that twist reality until it becomes unrecognizable. But there's one patient, one boy, I've never been able to forget. He wasn't violent, he wasn't loud, he just didn't belong in any kind of world I understood. His name was Eli Turner, 14 years old when he came to us at St. Martin's Behavioral Center in 2011. He'd been transferred from a pediatric ward after a string of visual disturbances and self-harm attempts. His intake report said he claimed to see another version of himself whenever he looked in a mirror. I remember reading that and rolling my eyes. We'd had dozens of cases like it. Dissociation, hallucination, derealization. Standard stuff. But when I met Eli, something about him felt off. He didn't act schizophrenic or manic. He was quiet, polite, eerily calm for a kid in a locked unit. He just refused to look at anything reflective. Mirrors, polished windows, even the metal on sink handles. He'd flinch like it burned him. The first time I asked him why, he said softly, "Because he smiles when I don't." Eli's room had been cleared of all reflective surfaces per his treatment plan. He'd spend hours drawing in silence, mostly dark shapes and faces, some with missing eyes, others with wide, toothy grins. When the psychiatrist tried exposure, therapy, showing him his reflection in small, safe increments, he'd panic, sob, and beg to make it stop. I remember one session vividly. We sat in the therapy room, with a small hand mirror covered by a cloth on the table. Dr. Halverson asked him to lift the cloth for just 1 second. Eli shook his head, tears already pooling. The doctor pressed gently. "You're safe here. Nothing can hurt you," Eli whispered. "It's not about me getting hurt. It's about him getting out." The doctor dismissed it as metaphorical delusion, but the way he said it, dead serious, no hint of fantasy, it stuck with me. 2 weeks later, the incident happened. It was just past 3 a.m., and I was doing rounds in the adolescent wing. I remember that hour clearly because the ward was unusually still. No alarms, no calls, just that electric hum of the building's lights. Then I heard it, a faint tapping, not from a patient door, but from inside Eli's room. I peeked through the small observation window, expecting him to be awake or pacing. Instead, he was sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at something in front of him, something shiny. I unlocked the door and stepped in quietly. He didn't even turn his head. He was staring into a shard of broken glass, probably from a light cover he'd somehow managed to crack. He was whispering, "To it." I crouched beside him and said, "Eli, give me the glass. You know you can't have that." He didn't respond, just kept whispering. So I leaned closer and realized he wasn't whispering to himself. He was whispering with someone. The shard's surface was catching light from the hall, and I swear to God, his reflection wasn't. Moving in sync. His lips were still. The reflections were moving. And it was smiling. I froze. Eli looked up at me with tears streaming down his cheeks and said, "He wants to trade places now." Before I could react, the overhead lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the glass in his hand shattered into dust like it had imploded from within. He collapsed instantly. Pulse normal. Breathing shallow but steady. He was unconscious for almost 3 minutes. After that night, everything about Eli changed. He stopped drawing, stopped speaking altogether. He wouldn't respond to his name, wouldn't eat unless spoon-fed. It was as if the light behind his eyes had gone out. Then the staff began noticing something strange. Whenever anyone entered his room, their reflection in the window looked slightly off, not reversed, just delayed like it was half a second behind. I noticed it myself once during morning rounds. I lifted my hand to wave. My reflection didn't move until after I lowered it. Just a fraction of a second, but enough to make my stomach turn. Maintenance replaced the window, didn't help. A week later, Eli vanished. Security footage showed nothing. Door locked, sensors functional. 1 second, he was lying in bed. The next, the bed was empty. The only clue was the window. It wasn't broken, but there was a faint handprint on the inside of the glass, too large to be his. And from the outside, the reflection on that same pane showed Eli still sitting in the bed, staring straight ahead. They called it a runaway. That's what the official report says, but I've seen the footage. I've seen the reflection that shouldn't exist. After Eli disappeared, the mirror incidents got worse. Staff started seeing things in reflections, quick flashes of faces, that weren't their own. One nurse refused to come back after she saw her reflection grin at her when she wasn't smiling. Another quit on the spot after hearing a whisper in the bathroom mirror. "You looked at me too long." Eventually, they sealed the entire adolescent wing, all mirrors removed, windows covered in opaque film. The administration blamed structural light distortion. We all knew better. That was 14 years ago. Last month, I got a call from an old coworker who still works there. They've reopened the wing for adult observation now. New paint, new lighting, new staff. But she said something that made my blood run cold. One of their new patients, mid-30s, catatonic, had been sketching something over and over. A boy's face. Short hair, faint scar on the chin, and underneath the drawing, he'd written 3 words. He came back. When they asked him his name, he smiled for the first time and said, "Eli." I keep a small mirror by my bedside now, covered with a cloth. Some nights I wake up and feel the urge to look, to see if he's still there. But I never do. Because deep down I know the truth. He never left. He's just waiting for someone else to meet his eyes. And when they do, the reflection will finally smile. Hospitals have a word for rooms they'd rather you not think about. They call them de-escalation spaces, seclusion suites, low-stimulation environments. But those of us who worked the wards just called them what they really were: the quiet rooms. I first worked one at Hollow Creek State Hospital, a grim red brick facility built in the 1940s and barely modernized since. When I started, they told me, "You'll get used to the sound." I didn't understand what that meant until the first night I had to lock someone inside. The quiet room was simple. Text 10 feet, padded walls, one heavy door with a small reinforced window, and a ceiling vent that hummed like a faraway engine. No furniture, no mirrors, no light switch inside. We controlled everything from the outside. When a patient got violent or unpredictable, this was where they went, until they calmed down. Usually a few hours, sometimes a night. The first time I opened that door, I felt something that's hard to explain. Not fear exactly. More like the air itself didn't want me in there, like walking into someone else's dream. In 2013, we admitted a patient named Harold Keene, 42, diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and severe insomnia. He'd been found wandering a highway, barefoot, muttering about a man who lives in the hum. He refused to sleep, refused to eat, and refused to stay in any room longer than a few hours. When asked why, he said, "He only comes when it's quiet." The doctors thought he meant auditory hallucinations, so they adjusted his meds and sent him to Ward C, my ward. For the first few nights, Harold barely spoke. He'd sit up in bed, eyes darting toward the vent above him, and flinch whenever the air system clicked on. I tried to comfort him once, said, "It's just the fan." He looked at me like I'd just told him his own death sentence. He is the fan. It was a Tuesday when the screaming started. Not yelling, not panic, shrieking, long animal sounds that made the hall lights vibrate in their housings. When we reached Harold's room, he was clawing at the air vent, his fingernails bloody. We restrained him, tried to calm him down, but he kept thrashing, screaming, "He's in the vent, he's in the vent, don't let him hum again." After 30 minutes, the psychiatrist ordered him placed in seclusion. I escorted him to the quiet room. He didn't fight. Didn't even cry, just whispered, "You'll hear him too." I closed the door. The latch clicked, and the hallway went still. For the first hour, everything was normal. He paced, muttered, eventually went quiet. I logged his activity, checked vitals through the window, and sat back at the desk. Then, just before 2 a.m., the building's air system kicked on. You know that low, constant hum vents make when the fans cycle? That's all it was. But Harold started screaming again. Worse this time, banging on the walls, begging to be let out. I ran to the door, peered through the window. The light inside flickered once, twice, and then went dark. The hum grew louder, not mechanical anymore, almost rhythmic, like someone whispering through the ductwork. I froze. It wasn't coming from the hallway system, it was coming from inside the room. When maintenance restored power 5 minutes later, the noise stopped. But Harold was gone. Door still locked, bolts unbroken, just gone. The only sign he'd ever been there was a patch of condensation on the metal vent cover. 5 long finger streaks sliding upward, as if someone had been pulled through from the inside. Security reviewed the cameras. The feed cut out for exactly 5 minutes and 6 seconds, the same duration as the power flicker. No one entered or exited the room during that time. They called it equipment malfunction and moved on. But the air system never sounded the same again. 2 nights later, a nurse named Valerie volunteered to clean the quiet room. She was practical, unshakable, the kind of person who could handle anything. After 10 minutes, she radioed me. Her voice was shaking. "There's something in the vent." We arrived, opened the grate, and found what looked like human fingernails, 10 of them wedged in the filter, all broken, all real. That was enough for Valerie. She quit the next day. The doctors sealed the room, pending inspection, but everyone knew what that meant. Lock it. Forget it. Don't ask questions. A month passed. The new shift nurse, young kid named Jacob, didn't believe any of the stories. He joked about the fan man and even dared to spend a night shift. Sitting outside the quiet room door with the vent running, at 3:10 a.m., he radioed me laughing. "See? Nothing here but hot air, then static, then a low humming sound, so deep it rattled the radio speaker. And then screaming. Not his voice. Something else, shrill and layered, like dozens of people screaming at once. By the time I reached him, Jacob was gone too. His flashlight lay on the floor, still on, pointing at the door, and from behind that door came tapping, 3 slow knocks from the inside. They sealed the quiet room permanently after that, bolted steel over the vent, new paint, new flooring, new walls. But everyone who's ever worked at Hollow Creek knows that room never really quieted down. The new staff call it Room Zero. It's supposed to be empty. No lights, no vents, no power supply. But every few months, the night shift reports the same thing. At exactly 2:07 a.m., the air vents in the hallway start humming. Soft, steady, familiar. And from behind that, bolted, Tor's voice whispers through the metal. "Shh, it's too loud in here." They tell new hires that the quiet room doesn't exist anymore, that it was demolished, repurposed, wiped from the blueprints. But every time I pass that hallway, I can still hear it. The faint hum bleeding through the wall, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. And when I listen long enough, I swear I can hear Harold's voice whispering right through the air. "I told you, he only comes when it's quiet."